everyone, it's Victoria Field, co-host of Metabolic Health Summit, and I'm very excited to introduce to you one of our MHS speakers, Dr. Breanna Egan. He's an associate professor of sport and exercise physiology at the School of Health and Human Performance at Dublin City University in Ireland. His research focuses on the molecular regulation of skeletal muscle function, and so he's got a really big interest between the synergy of nutrition and exercise, and they're studying everything from omega-3s to caffeine, exogenous ketones, and somehow in his free time, he's also a Gaelic footballer. Dr. Egan, I'm so excited to have you and joining me here today. Thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah, thanks, Victoria, and thanks for the nice introduction there.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really do it all when it comes to, you know, you've got the science component, you're also an athlete yourself, you're also a performance nutritionist.
Yeah.
I'm so curious, and I kind of want to take it back a little bit to how this sort of passion for this kind of research started for you, and yeah, where it all began.
Yeah, I guess the first point really is that I am and have been involved in sport for most of my life, and that was probably the impetus that made me become interested in sports science, as we call it here in Ireland. Kinesiology is probably the closest discipline in the US, and that's what I did my undergraduate degree in. And over the course of that program, became more interested in nutrition and performance more than any of the other disciplines that are in sports science. And so, having met a couple of very good mentors as part of my undergraduate program, really became interested in the research side of things as well. But I trained as a performance nutritionist then, initially having at master's level, before getting into the research side of things with the PhD and postdoc and so on. So initially starting out from a very applied kind of sports science, sports nutrition role, moving into more of this molecular regulation of muscle metabolism that you mentioned, and then coming really full circle back to more applied sports science and sports nutrition research nowadays. So it's been a kind of meandering journey, so to speak, but like you say, a lot of different experiences along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's pretty cool that you're an athlete yourself and you're also researching this stuff. I'm sure that's been helpful for you in the process.
I always say to people, like, it's athletes a loose term sometimes, because it's our national sport. Gaelic Games is our national sport. But when I was in the US, as you know yourself, during the summer, and when you take a closer look at national US sports, you realise that we're talking about a different athlete pool altogether. So let's just say I train, quite a bit during each week and have done for most of my life. But I don't think we're on the same level as pro sports by any stretch of the imagination.
I don't know. I've seen an actual Gaelic football game in action, and it's pretty intense. I'm not gonna lie. Actually, in Cork, and yep, it's pretty intense. So I have to say, I got to give you credit for that. But it's so interesting. You started sort of with this interest, this personal interest of being involved in this yourself, and it's sort of morphed into being able to study a wide variety of nutrients that are really everything from caffeine to resveratrol, you name it. Talk a little bit about some of the work that you've done with exogenous ketones specifically, because that's really interesting. And you've also done one study with a ketogenic diet as well that I'd love to.
Yes, I'll get into that. So it was about, my group I established my own group in 2011, and from that time we had kind of two tracks in our group. One was more the molecular regulation of muscle that we were interested in, that was kind of the extension of my postdoc, and the other track was really applied performance nutrition. So we had been doing various different experiments, usually around team sport athletes, usually looking at kind of acute supplementation with what we call ergogenic aids, so things like beetroot juice shots, caffeinated chewing gum, as you mentioned. And a potential PhD student had come to me at the time. His name was Mark Evans, and he had been and is a very talented student recently. He's actually graduating from his PhD tomorrow. And at that time, he had secured funding that allowed him to do whatever he wanted, actually, for his PhD. So it's not like, traditionally sometimes you end up where the project is already predetermined. But Mark was in the fortunate position of being able to do whatever he wanted. And so we were interested in doing something maybe a little bit riskier. Sometimes you have to kind of play it safe with these types of projects. So there'd been a lot of rumors at the time, and he and I both knew a couple of people who were part of programs that were potentially using exogenous ketones for performance. This is around 2015. And at that time, of course, the patent had been out for at least, I think, a couple of years on the ketone monoester from Oxford. So again, there was a few different conference preceding abstracts that you could see, and there was just this kind of bubbling interest in exogenous ketones as performance aid. So that was late 2015. We decided to, let's just see what happens. And you could, at that point, of course, you could buy ketone salts. So the first study that we undertook was, well, the first year we undertook to do a literature review of where the field was at. You know, is there any possible evidence for exogenous ketones being an ergogenic aid? And then we also undertook just a study to look at what is the metabolic response when people consume ketone salts. And, you know, really, we made great progress in that first year. By the end of the sort of June, July of 2016, we had a literature review completed and submitted, and subsequently accepted in the Journal of Physiology. And that, I mean, frankly, we started off with this kind of idea of maybe there's something in this. And then when we looked at the literature, and I mean, so much of it goes back to the 60s and 70s, there's just an abundant amount of research that shows the metabolic actions of ketone bodies. And again, to our mind, and we tried to be critical when we were writing the review, you know, would there be evidence that they could be used as a fuel source? Would there be evidence that they could affect substrate utilization? And we kind of fell on the side of things that, yes, there's potential in all of this. And so, like, the timeline's important because, as I said, it was kind of June, July time. And just as we were about to submit our review, this now infamous paper from Kieran Clark's group in Cell Metabolism emerged right at the end of that summer. So we quickly had to actually rewrite major sections of the review to incorporate that paper.
Oh,
but of
wow.
course, that paper was, you know, the one that really kickstarted all of this, because there were several very interesting components of that paper that talked about substrate utilization and the metabolism of ketones during exercise. And then subsequently, in one of the studies, they showed this 2% performance benefit in elite cyclists. So, you know, at that point, which was again late 2016, we thought we were really onto something interesting. And, you know, of course, in good practice is you approach these things with the kind of null hypothesis that, you know, you choose an intervention, ergogenic aid, training approach, whatever, and the assumption is that it'll have no effect. And, you know, you try to disprove that null hypothesis. So that's what we more or less set about with 2 or 3 subsequent studies that we've published. And each of those has looked at the supplementation of exogenous ketones in kind of different exercise models. One was an intermittent running model in team sport players, so basically soccer players and Gaelic Games players, and the other was in middle to long distance runners, so endurance type athletes. And so I can talk a little bit more about those findings, but ultimately what we've done is in the short term, in the last couple of years, we've really focused on this performance question. But as work I've done with Dom and Andrew, for example, we've been also interested in this potential idea that exogenous ketones are having other effects beyond, say, athletic performance. Because our results would generally suggest that there's very little effect on performance per se, whereas we've seen interesting findings in terms of metabolic changes, and others have found interesting changes in relation to beta-hydroxybutyrate as a signaling molecule, and potentially regulating the response to training as well. And that's kind of where we see the direction going in the long run.
Interesting. Okay, so it's a little bit more under the surface there when it comes to AHP specifically in training, sure, and how it does maybe potentially benefit in some ways. It's so fascinating, and you've worked with a wide variety of athletes. It's not just sort of the endurance-based athletes. What have you? Where do you see, I guess, the future of exogenous ketones potentially, and or even nutritional ketosis when it comes to athletic performance? Because I think it's still when the keto was sort of that first buzzword kind of floating around, one of the first things you heard was, oh, well, it just training wise, if you're at all in the fitness community, keto might not be the way to go. Now it's really kind of changed. And especially when it comes to endurance athletes, but I have a personal bias and interest in strength training specifically, but where do you see the future of both nutritional ketosis and exogenous ketones?
Yeah, so I mean, it's such a big question because I mean, of course, the immediate reaction when all of this was happening initially was like, you know, people immediately jump on one camp or the other and they say, oh, these are definitely going to be positive effects, or definitely going to be negative effects. And then, as I always try to, you know, outline in my presentations and in interviews like this, you know, there's very nuanced discussions to be had about very, you know, components of athletic performance. So, you know, in the truest sense of an ergogenic aid, we're often just talking about you use a supplement, does it deliver a performance benefit directly? As in, can athletes run faster for longer? Can they complete a time trial in a short period of time? So that's the kind of classic question. In our hands at the moment, we're not really seeing any benefits of exogenous ketones on that side of things. Now, as I said, the spectrum of what can be done from an athletic performance point of view in terms of dietary intervention and supplement interventions is very broad. So if we're now talking about things like, another major aspect would be recovery. So, classic recommendations are around combinations of carbohydrate and protein. A couple of studies at least have provided indications that when ketones are added to that recovery mix, that there's potentially benefits in terms of recovery of muscle glycogen to a slightly greater extent, or at least a little bit quicker in these kind of short-term models, or potentially activation of signaling pathways that are more indicative of muscle protein synthesis, which is used as a surrogate for sort of growth and repair. So I think the evidence right there is actually pretty strong, or let's not say strong, let's say it's pretty promising at the moment in terms of the types of research that could be done. And it's probably the direction, if I had an unlimited budget, I'd probably go down the recovery and adaptation route rather than the performance route. But again, it's probably important to go back and say we've only looked at very specific contexts of this kind of performance potential. And if you bring up the ketogenic diet, one of the examples that's often given is that, yeah, sure, ketogenic diets are unlikely to have benefits in, say, high intensity interval type training, the kind of characteristics of, say, soccer and Gaelic games and say lacrosse, for example, is US sport. However, if you move it into, say, the endurance to ultra endurance paradigm, there's a huge amount of anecdotal evidence and a small amount of published research that would say that in those longer duration, lower intensity activities, there probably is going to be a benefit to certain individuals for a ketogenic diet. So again, it's quite nuanced. I was on a call just last night actually with one of the players from one of the teams that I work with, and this is hurling, which is another form of Gaelic games. And his question was, I'm in a post-surgery period. I want to control my weight. I'm actually put on a little bit of weight in the off season, so I want to kind of bring that back. Should I go on a ketogenic diet? And the conversation was really around the point, did he understand what he was talking about there? Did he understand how to implement it? What are his goals in terms of degree of weight loss, maintenance, muscle mass? And again, with all those things discussed, I was pretty happy for him to undertake that. But even at the end of the call, I was kind of saying to him, this isn't the type of diet I would recommend to all the players on the team, because I'm not sure they can implement it or, adhere to it and so on and so forth. Maybe it's not the right time for them and so on. So I guess what I'm trying to give is just a very broad perspective of the different challenges between, research questions versus, applied practical questions. And again, trying to, not to fall into the category of saying it's all or nothing, yes or no for any given context. There's really, very important discussions to be had to know very important details about when you would and would not implement any of these therapies or approaches.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think the recovery point you made is really interesting, just as somebody who actually used to compete professionally in the fitness and bodybuilding space. And just on that anti-inflammation sort of front has been hugely helpful when it comes to everything from joint pain to muscle aches and things along those lines. So, there's such a vast area that you can cover when it comes to studying something like recovery, but I'm sure that's interesting for yourself as well as also.
Yeah, the point I've been making quite often as well is that beta hydroxybutyrate, if you just look at the research around that as a molecule, and whether we're talking about cell models, animal models, human models where it's been infused, supplementation where it's been ingested, exogenous ketones, the effects of BHB as being a very prominent either signaling molecule or a molecule that affects substrate utilization. There's no doubt about the potency of beta hydroxybutyrate to do those things. The question is, when it's then applied in these athletic contexts, what's the best way to utilize its benefits or metabolic effects for benefit, I would say. And that's I think where the research is at right now, but it's very young. There's less than 10 performance papers that have been performed. There's 2 recovery papers, there's 1 training papers, in terms of humans. So, we're still very early days at the moment, certainly on the exogenous ketone side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting field, though, and where
Oh, for
things are
sure.
headed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're really leading the charge in many respects on that front. And you're also researching a variety of other nutrients and things that
Mm,
are really quite fascinating when it comes
mm,
to athletic performance. Everything from
mm,
caffeine, omega-3s,
mm.
a wide variety, leucine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you want to talk a little bit more about sort of how that's expanded and what you
Yeah.
do beyond just the exogenous ketone front.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, essentially, we're interested in performance in the broader sense. So, when I talked about the idea that there's one stream of my lab that's working on applied research, the kind of two streams under that are really the kind of athletic performance side of things, and we also do a certain amount of work in interventions in elderly. So, we're particularly interested in, as I said, performance, and that in elderly is measured by things like leg strength, walking speed, things like timed up and go tests. So I would put that all under the barrier of, or the banner of performance. And so again, many of the strategies that we end up investigating in older adults and in terms of applying them to practice, they actually come from research that's been done in athletes. For example, looking at what factors might influence muscle mass or the adaptive response to exercise. So how we've ended up in looking at things like leucine, which obviously drives the muscle protein synthesis response. We've been looking at things like protein hydrolysates, which are you take a whole protein like whey protein or casein, and it's digested with various different enzymes to make it have slightly different properties to the original protein and potentially more bioactivity. So they have been two major pieces that we've got involved in. Omega-3 has been interesting because, as you know, omega-3 is used a lot in athletes, sometimes around recovery, sometimes more around just the dampening of inflammation as well. But in older adults, it's got this potential ability to improve what's called anabolic sensitivity. So in essence, to make a long story short, older adults sometimes demonstrate this phenotype called anabolic resistance, where they don't respond as well to an ingestion of protein or to an exercise session as younger individuals. But there's again some evidence that supplementation with omega-3 can kind of reduce that anabolic resistance and improve anabolic sensitivity. So I guess what I'm painting again is a picture of, all of these different nutrients have got evidence in certain contexts, and then our interest is, can they be applied in others to really bring about benefits to performance? And again, I know I'm talking about performance in a very broad sense there, but it's very fruitful for us at the moment, and keeps a lot of students very interested, so it's enjoyable.
It's really fascinating. I mean, what you're doing with athletes and older adults. I mean, just the wide variety of applications and where this is headed is pretty exciting, I would say, when it comes to looking at this overall. So, what are you most excited about personally, and looking at and investigating further?
Yeah, so actually, it's funny. I was writing a grant application the other night, and we were talking about this. It was for a student, but it was kind of like the marriage of these two parallel themes at the moment, which is the exogenous ketones and performance work, and the kind of elderly work. And so, moving away from the athletes and more into therapeutic uses of exogenous ketones. So, we've had an interest for some time around the glucoregulatory potential of exogenous ketones. So this fact that's been demonstrated many, many times that exogenous ketones can blunt the rise in blood glucose that occurs to a carbohydrate-containing meal. And so that's one element to it. So there's potential therapeutic application there in diabetics. And then the other element really is this anti-catabolic effect that's been demonstrated several times as well. And that's the opinion piece that we wrote with Andrew and Dom. It was earlier this year that it was published. And so the kind of if you look at the threats to healthy aging, let's call it, a lot of it is insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes. The other element really is kind of inactivity and loss of muscle function, muscle mass. And we really believe that that there's therapeutic potential in exogenous ketones because of their effects on glucoregulatory aspects and also their anti-catabolic effects. And so it's trying to marry those concepts into getting funded and getting those research projects done. But I do think that there's a lot of potential there. It's outside my wheelhouse. The cognitive side of things, though, is another area. And if you're working on elderly and you're looking at muscle mass and muscle function, and you're talking about exogenous ketones, you can't ignore the fact that there might be some potential application there for people with cognitive impairment. That's the hypothesis. I know there's a group in Canada who are doing that kind of work right now. So, I mean, I think that we are at, ultimately we could all be proven wrong, but at the moment, there's a lot of circumstantial and preliminary evidence that's sending us towards this idea that there's therapeutic potential in these exogenous ketones. So that's I'd be excited to get that kind of work done. If there's anyone who wants to put money into that pot.
Yes, contact Brendan Egan over here. Yeah, no, it's really fascinating. I mean, what it could mean for people like the elderly population, or even children, when it comes to those suffering from epilepsy, Alzheimer's, you name it. Where maybe they can't implement something like a ketogenic diet, but exogenous ketones could be a useful tool to something that couldn't implement. I mean, that's a really interesting path to kind of go down, and important work, because the potential is endless, really, I feel like.
Yeah, and I do take, though, the major criticism, of course, would be that these molecules at the moment, in terms of commercially available forms, are expensive. And so it's kind of like the argument that's made as well, there are cheaper drugs available, and they may be as effective or more effective. And so I think we have to also be aware that, part of the work might be using these exogenous ketones as they are right now, but it may reveal pathways and other therapeutic angles. And I think, it's not to discount the value in the ketones themselves, but the pathways and their therapeutic effects, I think, is really interesting as well. So again, I said earlier in the call, like, you get this kind of pushback on the ketone side of things from a lot of people, but again, I think that people are jumping into one camp or the other a little bit too quickly, rather than realizing that this is a bigger scientific question that we're working on here. It's not an argument on Twitter that we're interested in, so that kind of thing. So,
Right. I mean, with social media, it's really interesting, some of the things that are kind of coming out of the woodwork as this research is really just emerging. I mean, we're still in its infancy, I would say, when it comes to that. Obviously, the ketogenic diet's been around for 100 years, but exogenous ketones specifically is a really fascinating topic. And we're so excited for you to kind of dive into this. And just the synergy between nutrition and exercise, just overall human performance, I think is going to be really great in Metabolic Health Summit 2020. So we cannot wait for that. Talk a little bit about what you're going to kind of cover at the event.
Yeah, so the plan at the moment is it's going to be in the session that relates to athletic performance, and obviously there's going to be some discussion about ketogenic diets in that side of things. And myself and Dr. Breanna Stubbs are going to focus more on the exogenous ketones and their performance. So, as you know, we're trying to plan a joint presentation at the moment, so we'll see how that materializes. I've never done kind of a tandem presentation, but we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so the two of us obviously have strong interests and publication records in this area, and we're going to try and marry slightly different opinions on certain things that we have, but also the results that we have from our respective studies, and focus really on this question of what are the different types of exogenous ketone supplements, and what do they mean in terms of changes in beta-hydroxybutyrate concentration. Move on then to discuss the implications of those facts for some of the performance studies that have been done so far, and then move into the more recent questions, which I've mentioned just there in passing, the recovery question, and then this idea that a recent paper came out that talked about the potential to blunt the overtraining response in athletes who are training very intensely. So there's a whole series of papers that have come out that we'd like to review. I mean, not get into too much detail on them, but kind of give a picture of what the evidence is so far, where there's lacking evidence, and where the direction of the field needs to go, in our opinion. So if we pull it off, it'll be a good presentation, I'm sure.
That would be an incredible presentation. We've got two of the world's top experts on this topic, Dr. Stubbs, Dr. Egan, going to be joining forces to be able to present this information. I think it's going to be fascinating. So thank you for participating in MHS 2020.
No, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. And if you don't have your tickets yet, you can still get them. MetabolicHealthSummit.com is where you can find them and learn more information about Dr. Egan. Where can people find you, or some of your work? What would be the best resource you have to provide them with?
I think ResearchGate is where I post most of my papers. As you mentioned about social media, that I was going to butt in and say I actually am not on. I'm not on social media. I just hear from my students the odd thing.
Amazing.
So if there's any major criticism going on, I'm probably not aware of it. But if I want to contact me directly, ResearchGate is probably the way to go.
ResearchGate, perfect. That's awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time out. I know it's much later there in Ireland, so thank you for jumping in here and for participating in MHS 2020. And we'll be seeing you soon in January. And thank you all for watching. Thanks so much, Dr. Egan. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.